So Easter, uh, every year this holiday comes around, and every year I tend to see people asking the same kinds of questions about this holiday, sort of why it's a holiday, why we have the traditions that we have, why are we doing this anyways? What is the whole point of Easter? Why? It's kind of a confusing topic, right? Because you have on one hand the people who are like, well, has something to do with a guy who was killed and then put into a cave and then he came to life 3 days later, right? You got that whole side of the story where you're like, okay, maybe what is that? What is all? Where's all that coming from, right? What does all that mean? And on the other side of it, you have the supposedly secular traditions of Easter eggs, Easter bunnies, chicks hatching out of eggs, and you also have candy such as chocolate eggs and the like, chocolate bunnies, uh, and such that, and people are like, okay, well, why are we doing this? What does this all mean? Where does this come from? And so today I'm going to do a little bit of exploration with you guys, just as far as what I understand and sort of some symbolic exploration, just to see if we can maybe explain this a little bit more. So, and why we might be doing the things that we're doing. And so Easter, um, just even in the word itself, that's a question that I don't think people ask when they ask these questions. Is why do we call it Easter to begin with? Like, there's a bunch of questions that you could ask about how this word was put together, how old it might be, as long along with the other cardinal directions. Those are some old words, but like you've got east, right? And you've got stir, right? It's kind of a combination of maybe two four-letter words, right? That were made each individually of two syllables, right? EA and ST, east, and ST and ER, stir, right? So it's like a contraction, like a word that they put together, you know? But there's some other examples of Easter or where that name might have come from. In the Bible, they say that Easter is Esther, you know, because there's another goddess. This is the thing that they don't teach you. Um, there's a goddess that's even older than the Bible. It's a Sumerian goddess. Um, and her name is this, Ishtar, right? And people have said, okay, these two words aren't related. They come from two different languages, too far apart. We can't tell, even though the lineage, goes straight down. But Easter and Ishtar. Ishtar is said to be Esther. I think it's ES Esther in the Bible. They say that, right? She plays a like very minor part. I don't think she's in much of it, right? But Ishtar also has another name because Ishtar was only one of the ancient civilizations' interpretations of this goddess. The even older version, or what's the word I'm looking for? Not competing, but like contemporary Inanna. And I believe that Inanna is the older version, right? She's the daughter of Nana, who is the one of the father gods, right? And in her stories, which I have here in this book, so if you're looking for way to find out more about these stories, this would be one of the books that I would definitely recommend. It's Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, Her Stories and Hymns from Sumer. These are the Sumerian gods and goddesses, right? Probably predate the Bible by, I think, at least 3,000 years, probably more. 3 to 6,000 years, something like that. You know, the stories that we're talking about that are being passed down both orally and then in cuneiform writing, right? Let's just see if I can. Here's the pantheon of these goddesses, gods and goddesses. The three creator gods: Ki, she's a female; An, the sky god; and Namu, goddess of the watery deep. But there's Inanna, queen of heaven and earth, right? Daughter of Nana and Ningal, who are the descendants of Ninlil and Enlil. But these are ancient Sumerian gods, right? And in her book, there's a story. I like the Halupu tree. We'll do that one another day, right? It's before the return. Okay. The descent of Inanna. And this details a story of her going to the underworld and going through a set of, what would you call these? She had to give up things each step she took down into the underworld. And when she got to the end, she was struck dead and nailed to a wall in a cave. And then her servants come to rescue her 3 days later. I believe it's 2 or 3 days later, something like that, right? And so this is a story about a goddess that existed a few thousand years uh, before the Bible, right? Before the Bible was ever written, before those words were ever put down. But sounds an awfully lot like where we might get even the word Easter from and why we celebrate it, right? It's the same story. You guys are like, okay, so it's another story of somebody having to go into a cave, getting nailed up for something, and uh, getting rescued from the cave days later and coming back to life. What does it mean? Um, these were actually alchemical allegories for metallurgy. The gods and goddesses are the different forms of metal, right? And so as she's going into the underworld, she's being purified, right? And once they go through the whole process of purification, then they can rescue the thing that they want, the pure goddess, right? Which in Inanna's case, I believe, is nickel, right? I believe that's like part of the metal. It's like nickel steel, right? Something like that. Or there's another ore, cupronical, copper, nickel, copper, nickel, silver ore, cupronical, right? These were the ores that these people were using. This is the Bronze Age that you're talking about. And so that's why it was like so important for them to write these stories down, right? And why they would worship it. Because it was literally part of their entire philosophy of how the world worked. It was like they knew and understood how to make bronze because they understood the world so well that they could do that. Nowadays, people are like, "Oh, you just melt the rocks down," you know, and it's like that's like the end of the civilization's version of technology, right? But the first humans that actually like figured out how to do things and even started writing language in the first place in ways that you could actually keep and record for long enough that we can still read them today, you know, because that means that in order to get to that point in your civilization, you would have had a ton of time before that where you were just passing these stories down orally and you didn't have writing and you were just working together and like figuring stuff out, building the civilization slowly over time, right? But eventually you figure out how to do everything, right? People fear this stuff now because, the Bible and Catholicism and every other religion out there says, you gotta stick to our version of the story where we're right and we're in charge and we get to kill everybody if they don't agree with us, right? But they kind of lost the plot, I think, a little bit from what the true intention of you know why you're celebrating things really is, right? And it's like it's because it has to do with the nature of the universe, right? So before we go, Ishtar, Inanna, she's a fertility goddess and a goddess of war, goddess of battle, goddess of love, right? But she's not like the mother goddess, right? The mother goddess, I think, was associated with the moon, right? The father with the sun, right? I think we all kind of have that idea, right? Because those would have been like the two most important and prevalent things in every human's life from the beginning of time until now. You would have definitely understood that the daytime is the time where you can do stuff, and the nighttime is like the time where you can't see. You could get eaten by lions in the middle of the night, or whatever particular animal lives in your area of the woods, right? So it's like undeniable parts of nature, right? And so as they learned those things, there's another thing that they learned about, which was the stars, because the stars are always in the sky, the planets, everything. That's why they had like astrology and astronomy and stuff way before uh, our generation was even born or thought about. They were studying this stuff. Ancient philosophers, mathematicians, the smart people, right? The people that ran everything. They knew how all of it worked. It was important to them, right? Because it was how they ran the whole world, right? Everywhere that there were people, they had some sort of relationship with the things that were around them because those are the things that are literally around you, right? And so Ishtar, Easter, the Eastern star, star in the east, the one that they sing about in the song, Star in the East, you know? It's an eastern star. Which star is it? It's actually not a star. Inanna and Ishtar, I believe, are associated with the morning and evening star, right? Esper and Vesper, that's what the Romans called them, I believe, right? Another name for one of them. You guys are going to love this one. Lucifer, the morning star, the light giver, the light bringer. It's not a star, it's a planet, it's Venus. And it's because when the sun makes its rotation around the earth, this is going to be probably completely wrong, completely out of, scale and everything, right? But when the sun makes its passage around the earth, right? And we have our like night and day, right? This side is night because it's on the opposite side, right? And so there's a planet, Venus, that as the planets make their transit, right, on one side of the sun, you see it as it comes up over the horizon, right? It leads the sun. So if you're, out there in the darkness at night looking at the stars, there eventually comes around every night a star that kind of like heralds, like, oh, okay, it's about to be daytime again, right? But then the funny thing is that as it rotates around, right, as the day progresses, it's almost like they switch spaces, they switch spots, right? And now it looks like when the sun goes down, the herald is there to follow it as it goes down below the horizon, right? So in the morning you see it first and it shows up, and then you see the sun, right? And then at sunset you see the sun go down, and then it's followed by the star, right? To let you know, okay, it's going down again, right? And they used to think that those were two separate stars, right? Because they saw them at different times of the day, right? But they thought that it somehow magically moved and switched, right? And so I believe that the symbols that they came up with for that, those two stars. Let's see if I can even draw it. I'll do it all as one. It'll be more impressive. Uh, you guys have all seen this, right? Right? That's the first star. That was the first shape. And then they would add this, right? It's probably a terrible drawing. I'm no artist, right? You have, this is a terrible compass rose, which is another interesting thing that they would even call that a rose to begin with. A rose by any other name. We'll go into that topic another day. Right? So the compass rose, right? The one that you see when you look on a compass, and then it has north, east, south, and west on it, right? Which then became associated with Polaris, right? The guiding star, the one that you could use to guide yourself north, south, east, and west. They figured that out, right? So that's one of the names. Easter. Why we call it Easter, right? Ishtar, the Eastern Star. Those two ideas are related to each other, right? Because Venus is the planet that they associated with women, right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, right? And so the uh, the woman that's associated with Venus, who do you think that is? Who do you think that is? It's Inanna. That's the woman, Ishtar, right? And so then why the eggs and why the bunny rabbits, right? Okay, so I'll give you the eggs first. We've done this one in the other video. It's the cosmic egg, right? In the beginning, we did the circle, right? And so it's supposed to be the idea that you can contain all ideas. And where does egg worship, where would egg worship even come from? You know? Well, there's two sources that I think you could look at. One is called Quab Allah, right? It's where we get the word cabal. But what it actually means, Quab Allah means chicken of God, because there's an egg of God. It's the cosmic egg of creation, which represents all ideas and everything that you can conceive of, right? And if you want more explanation of what that means, look at my video called In the Beginning, right? But Kabbalah means chicken of God. If you want to learn more about that idea, there's another book called The Chicken Kabbalah, which if you want to look up, how that might relate to everything, be my guest. But this is an ancient idea, an ancient philosophical idea that explains the origin of the universe. And it's also a fertility symbol, right? Because it's an egg. It's a renewable source of food, of life, of sustenance, right? And so the first civilizations that figured out how to uh, farm chickens for eggs, for example, would have instantly realized that, like imagine you're living back then, right? And you find this magical bird that lives in the forest that looks all crazy, has a crown on its head, weird things that hangs off of its face, crazy feathers that look like a phoenix depending on what kind of chicken you're even talking about, right? And it just keeps laying eggs. It's like a magical, the goose that laid the golden egg, right? It's like, so they it's not that they built a philosophy around that, right? It's that they already had the philosophy of the universe exists and we're in it and we have to exist too. And so it's like we're definitely going to take advantage of the fact that there's this magical bird that just happens to live here that's going to give us free food forever, as long as we raise them properly. And it's like, so you associate that with endless life, endless regeneration, endless, what I mean, growth and continuity, right? Just on its own. But then an egg actually, just funnily enough, happens to also, most of the time, be this weird thing where it's like this round, you know, container, right? That just happens to contain this other perfect sphere, you think, inside of it, that is where life comes from, right? Because you know that if you let the egg continue to fertilize, it becomes another chicken. And you're like, well, life must need a certain amount of this material and this material in order to exist, right? You may not even understand how much this relates to your own biology at the time that you're making these observations, right? You may not understand that humans also lay eggs, funnily enough, right? And we also have to fertilize them and, all the fun things that go along with that, right? But it's egg worship in a different sense. It's like you start to realize that this is like the order of nature, the nature of reality, right? It's like everywhere you look around you, you see this same thing repeated everywhere as well, right? All the other birds lay eggs too. And then you might make associations as well with the idea that plants lay eggs. They're just called seeds and they do different things and they're fertilized in a different way. All life on Earth kind of has to function like that too, right? It's all built with the same parts, you know? And so this is like a macro example. You finding an egg out in the forest and being like, what the heck is this? You mean I can eat this? You know, but it's like, what does that teach you? What is the fact that eggs exist even at all out in nature? That you could find something that's laying these things that, you know what I mean, every few days or however long it takes, right? And it teaches you about like how all of the other stuff in the universe works because now you understand this one thing, right? And so you might also form a particular connection to that time of year when, you know, life seems to be abundant again, everything's coming back, the seasons are coming back out of winter, right? When it's like all the little creatures seem to be having babies at the same time again. So everything's in abundance. It's like you might start to make associations with that time of year being the time of year for that type of activity across like every single civilization that's ever existed, essentially, right? It's just that as the holiday gets passed down from generation to generation and like you lose sight of like why you're calling it the things that you call it and why you do the things that you do in the first place, like why any of that has to do with anything, right? But it's like that's where some of the origins of this holiday come from, right? There's one more tangential thing that I can add, which is about the bunny rabbits, right? We talked earlier about how Venus and the moon had that special relationship, right? There's another philosophy, there's another mythical lineage that's separate from the ones that we've discussed so far. It's actually in the East, too. You could say that it's like the proto Chinese civilizations, right? The places that existed on the land where China currently exists, but before China was even China, right? All of those places, right? But out of them, there's one that still holds on to a tradition where the moon represents a mother kind of figure, and there's a rabbit that lives on the moon, right? They say that it's making like cakes or something. There's some type of medicine that the rabbit can make that uh, can, I think, grant you immortality, and that's what one of the things that the rabbit does on the moon, right? And I think that it's another reference to nickel. I think it's another reference to sort of like nickel plating or early nickel technology, right? Uh, it's the same as the Shinzu beans from Dragon Ball Z, right? It's like a this one-time thing that you can take and then it restores you to, you know, it restores these godlike characters back to full health, essentially, right? And I think that's what it is, right? And this is there's so much more that I could have talked about. There's so many more things that I could have done. I could have done better illustrations for you guys. I'm sorry. I'm just messing around here in my basement on my spare time. I'm not really, you know, taking myself too seriously here. But I'm trying to explain, right, that it's like ancient civilizations had connections to these things in tangential ways. And I think that they actually like, it's like how technology spreads, right? If these ancient stories, let's say, are instruction manuals, recipes for how to make things, right? The stories of creation, not of the creation of, the matter of the universe, but creation of like how do you manipulate the matter of the universe so that you can make coffee or bake bread or, you know, learn how to make things out of metal and do all of the crazy things that they did in the past, right? That they figured out way before we were here. We get the benefit of having all this stuff done for us already. They figured it out a long time ago, right? But if that's what these stories are, right, then they would be like super valuable, and you'd want to like people would want to understand like, okay, how are those guys over on the other side of the other hill? How is their civilization doing so much better than ours, right? And if you have trade routes between different civilizations that eventually get set up, right, then they're going to be communicating these kinds of stories to each other. But the stories are going to change over time, right? Because it's like, one guy hears the story, kind of explained to him maybe in, shorthand form. And he takes it back to his village, and then he kind of, broken telephones it to, oh yeah, this is what I heard. This is what they did. And they, this is what that means. And they, and everything gets like slightly changed and slightly, adapted over time and all that kind of stuff. And people like lose sight of what any of this stuff even means in the first place, which is crazy. But yeah, uh, it's the whole thing of like, if that's how important this stuff is, that might give us a little hint of why it's still sticking around as powerfully as it is. It's like it goes so deep into the roots of what makes us human, right? It's like this is like the ancient ancestral, stuff that reaches into the deepest parts of you, and makes you like still curious as heck about it. As like the how does this stuff form and why do we do this stuff, right? And so yeah, that's my little talk on maybe some of the origins of Easter, or maybe some of the reasons why we do those things, and some sources that you can go and look at for uh, the stories of that. The story about the rabbit on the moon, that's the Jade Rabbit. Uh, if you want to look that one up. Um, but yeah, hopefully that's helpful to at least somebody out there who's looking for more information on what that stuff might be. And I guess the last point that I wanted to make with all the rabbit stuff was just that it's like there's a huge tradition of uh, the the 12 animals and the zodiac and the Chinese zodiac and their stories and all that kind of stuff, and then that gets spread out all over the place too. Look at every religion. If you're interested in this stuff, you got to look at everything. You can't just focus on one. It, they tell you in the beginning of the Bible, right? There's a story of the Tower of Babel, Babylonians, right? It's like they said that, humanity's languages were confounded, right? And they could no longer speak to each other. And if you only follow the information from one source and you ignore everything else that's out there, you're missing all of the other parts of the explanation. I'll just put it that way, right? Because how do you account for it otherwise? It exists completely without you. It doesn't even care that you exist. Doesn't even care that you're out there. Doesn't even know, half the time that, oh, there's this other civilization on the other side of the planet, and they think that they're the center of the universe. It's like, yeah, every single civilization is doing that at the exact same time. So you got to look at everybody. You got to look at everything, and then you can maybe start to see, some of the pieces. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that talk, and yeah, please leave me a like, comment, subscribe, share, and hopefully that helped to explain, a little bit more about where Easter might have come from. Have a good one, guys.